Hi, I'm Kristen Amdahl and welcome back to my studio and channel. In today's video, I want to show you some tips and tricks for making the absolutely beautiful Leilani crochet shawl. This pattern features clever construction in a lengthwise crocheted shawl. The beautiful flower fringe is simultaneously crocheted with the stripes of the shawl in a simple lace pattern. It would be equally beautiful in a solid color too. You will need 568 yards of number 3 DK weight yarn, an I-9 or 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, yarn needle, and scissors. I used 4 balls of Be So Baby yarn in colorways Orchid, Princess, Aquamarine, and Peacock Teal. Let's get started. We're going to tie our yarn to our crochet hook and start with the flower fringe. Chain 15. Slip stitch into the 5th chain from your hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So notice we've created a chain 5 ring in there. We're going to work some stitches in that chain 5 ring now. So chain 3, double crochet in the ring, chain 3, and slip stitch in the ring. Okay, so we did chain 3, double crochet, chain 3, slip stitch, all in the ring, and we created 1 petal. You want to do that 3 more times. Okay, so this is what your work should look like at this point. You should have 4 petals, and we still have those 10 chains that we didn't work into yet. So now we'll chain 4, skip the next 4 chains, and slip stitch into the next chain. Skip the next, or chain 4, skip the next 4 chains, and slip stitch into the next chain. And that's what every flower fringe should look like at the beginning of each row. So at this point, we want to go back to working our stitch pattern in the middle of the shawl. So we did our flower fringe, and now we're going to work our stitch pattern in a multiple of 8 plus 1 for that starting chain. So depending on how big you want to make this, if you want to modify it to make it something other than the shawl, it'll be a multiple of 8 plus 1. The shawl calls for chaining 185, and I'll do a smaller version of that for the tutorial. Okay, so this is what the end of your setup row should look like. You should have your first flower fringe and your starting chain in a multiple of 8 plus 1. Row 1 now begins with a flower fringe on the other side of the work, and then we'll work row 1 across those starting chains. So another flower fringe is chain 15, slip stitch into the 5th chain from your hook to form a ring, and then chain 3, double crochet, chain 3, slip stitch in the ring. That's our first petal. You want to do that 3 more times for a total of 4 petals. Chain 4, then skip the next 4 chains, and slip stitch into the next chain, chain 4, skip the next 4 chains, and slip stitch into the next chain. Now we're ready to begin the row in the center of the first row of the center lace pattern, and that starts with a single crochet in the first chain, chain 3, skip the next 3 chains and 2 double crochets in the next chain, chain 3, skip the next 3 chains and single crochet in the next chain. So our repeat across the first row is then chain 3, skip 3 chains, 2 double crochets in the next chain, chain 3, skip 3 chains, and single crochet in the next chain. And you want to repeat that across your beginning chain. This is what your work should look like at the end of row 1. And now we're getting ready to start row 2, and this is where if you were changing color, you would now fasten off and start another color. I'm going to do the sample all in one color though, just so there's less ends and it doesn't look so messy and you can concentrate more on the stitches. But if you were changing color and you're following along on the pattern, you would fasten off here and join with a slip stitch in that same stitch to start the next color. Now, each row begins with a flower fringe. So row 2 is also going to start with a flower fringe. Chain 4. Skip the next 4 chains and slip stitch into the next chain. Chain 4. And slip stitch, skip the next 4 chains, and we'll slip stitch into the next single crochet, which is the last stitch on the previous row of the middle stitch pattern. And so now we're ready to begin row 2 of the center stitch pattern, and that will be this section here. We're going to start with a chain 5, which counts as a double crochet, chain 2, single crochet in the first chain 3 space, chain 3, skip the 2 double crochets and single crochet in the next chain 3 space, chain 5, skip the next single crochet and single crochet in the next chain 3 space, chain 3, skip 2 double crochets, single crochet in the next chain 3 space, and we're going to repeat this all the way across. After the last repeat, we'll finish the row with a chain 2 and double crochet in the last single crochet. And so, whoops. And this is what your work should look like at the end of row 2. Row 3 begins just as every other row. We're going to start with a flower fringe. Okay, at the end of the last fringe, at last chain 4 of the fringe, we're going to slip stitch into the top of the double crochet at the end of the previous row of the center stitch pattern, and row 3 begins with a chain 3, which counts as a double crochet, and we'll work 3 more double crochets in that same stitch. Single crochet in the next chain 3 space, and 7 double crochets in the next chain 5 space. Single crochet in the next chain 3 space, and we're going to repeat this all the way across. At the end of the last repeat, in that chain 5 space, we're going to work 4 double crochets in the 3rd chain of that chain 5 space, which counts as the top of the double crochet portion. And that's what your work should look like at the end of row 3. Row 4 begins with a flower fringe. If you wanted to use scrap yarn and use up leftovers at home, you could change the color at the end of each row if you wanted to. You could change color whenever you felt like it, or do all in one color. There's so many possibilities when you do stripes like this. And the beauty is that the fringe is worked right along with the project, so you don't have to try to match up those colors at the end. I love that about this project. It really gives you the freedom to choose how you want to do your color work. Okay, after the last chain 4 of the flower fringe, we're going to slip stitch into the top of the last double crochet at the end of the last row. And now we're ready to start row 4, chain 1 and single crochet in the same stitch, chain 3. And we'll skip the next 3 double crochets and work 2 double crochets in the next single crochet. Chain 3. Skip the next 3 double crochets and single crochet in the next double crochet. You want to repeat this all the way across. And this is what your work should look like at the end of row 4. Rows 2 through 4 is what we will repeat for the entire project, and then however long you decide to make your shawl or scarf or afghan or whatever you're going to make with this, just make sure that you keep repeating rows 2 through 4 and then end on a row 2. And if you want the same kind of striping that I got in my shawl, you'll want to change color every 2 rows. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about anything we talked about today, please leave them for me in the comments. And there's links in the video description for everything that I showed you in this video. Let us make time to create, share, and inspire today and every day. I'll see you in the next video.